I'm coming to you from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where amazing things are happening in this country. Thousands and thousands of lives are being transformed. In large part, that's because of friends like you. 2014 has been another incredible year. Let me show you what I mean.
As of the end of 2014, we have trained over 5,000 farmers, helping them increase their yield exponentially.
We serve 51 million meals to over 145,000 kids.
In 2014, Convoy of Hope served more than 2,000 women and girls by equipping them with the tools that they need to provide for their families.
In 2014, our fleet of trucks delivered food to 22 communities across the country, including our 1,000th community event in Las Vegas, Nevada.
We had over 27,000 volunteers, giving nearly 200,000 hours serving those in need.
This year we've shipped out over 60 million pounds of food and supplies all over the globe. That's over $80 million of wholesale value in terms of product.
Our disaster services team responded to 22 disasters, monitored over 1,100 weather-related events, and repaired, replaced, or rebuilt over 600 homes, both in the U.S. and abroad.
The Rural Compassion Team was able to serve 660 rural communities right here in America.
Convoy of Hope's reach is expanding around the world, in large part because of friends like you who are standing behind us, enabling us to touch millions and millions of people every year. But thank you for believing in Convoy of Hope, and thank you for caring and giving to hurting people around the world. Good morning. It's great to be here this morning. Thank you so much for the invitation. And Tom, thank you for your kind words. They're deeply appreciated, especially after what happened to me at a restaurant recently in Chicago. The waiter came up to my table and he said, "Sir, I just want you to know I love your television show. Can I have your autograph?" And I said, "I'll be happy to give you my autograph, but who do you think I am?" He said, "Well, aren't you Donald Trump?" I promise you right then and there, I vowed I was going to change my hairstyle. But it's great to be here. I have such great admiration for Rotary. We've had the opportunity to partner with you in chapters all over the country to touch communities, and it's just an outstanding organization. So thank you for what you do in Indianapolis and across the country. I also want to express appreciation to Pastors Jeffrey Johnson and Darren Chesky. Together, they have made a huge difference in the country of Haiti. Literally thousands of children have been rescued from the streets and been given a future because of these congregations and these men. Can we give them a hand of appreciation this morning? Well, the year was 1776, and George Washington and his soldiers had suffered a series of demoralizing defeats on the battlefield. They endured a cruel winter, often lacking medicine, water, food, and supplies. At one point in New York, they found themselves completely surrounded and outnumbered by the British troops. And the American Revolution was suddenly hanging in the balance. But then at just the right time, a heavy fog moved in, which enabled the army to slip past the British into New Jersey and then into Pennsylvania. But the will and the determination of the American army would continue to be tested, because the British would nip at their heels for 5 grueling months. But then, in a daring maneuver on Christmas night, Washington led his soldiers across the frigid waters of the Delaware River to make a surprise attack. Friends, that one brave decision to cross the Delaware would turn the war in their favor and would raise the morale of the entire country. This would be their defining moment. They would capture 900 enemy troops and 1,200 weapons without losing a single soldier. This would be their defining moment. That led to many other victories until finally the war was won. And historians have said that the courage and the faith of these soldiers preserved the revolution, the dream of a republic that would be founded upon liberty and justice for all. Well, how does that apply to us today? Well, today, as we consider the uncertainties of life and all the challenges that are facing our nation and facing communities just like Indianapolis and states like Indiana, as we look at that, Perhaps once again we are standing on the banks of the Delaware River and we have a decision to make. We can throw up our hands and we can accept defeat, or we can press on together and we can make this our defining moment. But I want to suggest to you this morning that this time, it's going to take more than military might and ingenuity and courage to navigate the waters that lie before us. No, this time, it's going to require a renewed commitment to kindness and compassion. This time, it's going to require that we live out what Jesus called the greatest commandment of them all, to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. I firmly believe that as citizens across this country, and citizens right here in Indianapolis and across Indiana, if we will dedicate ourselves to a lifestyle of kindness and compassion, 2015 can be a defining moment. And in turn, many of the problems that are plaguing our nation and our state will begin to fade, because a year of kindness can absolutely change everything. The truth is that today we find ourselves in situations where we need each other. And I love the title of what you have here. We are better together. That is awesome. And that's really the theme at Convoy of Hope as we rally people across this country to address hunger. A few years ago, I witnessed a robbery in my neighborhood, and I saw the thieves hop the fence and take off running. And without really thinking, I jumped in my car and I chased after them. And I did something you're probably not supposed to do. I pulled my car behind the getaway car so they couldn't escape. And there was a brief confrontation, but eventually they were apprehended and all the stolen property was recovered. Well, after that, the police showed up at my house and they wanted to take a formal statement. And before I knew it, all the neighbors were gathering around in our front yard with these police officers, and everyone was listening as I told details of this story. Well, at the time, I had a 10-year-old daughter her name was Lauren, and Lauren was right there in the front, and she was hanging on every word that I was saying. And then finally, with her eyes real big, she made an announcement to the entire crowd. She said, "My dad is Batman." That was a proud moment, I gotta tell you. In fact, the detective showed up a few days later and he wanted to know what had compelled me to chase after them. He said, "Mr. Donaldson, weren't you afraid? I mean, they could have had weapons." I said, "Sir," and looked back at him with his steel eyes, and I said, "Sir, no, I wasn't afraid. I'm Batman." But the truth is, friends, today we don't need more superheroes. We need selfless heroes. We need people like you and me who will show our children what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, when I was 12 years of age, two selfless heroes showed me what it meant to love your neighbor. It was August 1969, and my parents this particular night were supposed to attend a business meeting, and we were supposed to stay home with a babysitter. I have two younger brothers and a younger sister. But the babysitter was late. So my dad ordered us into the back of the car. We were going to have to go to the business meeting with our parents. My father was halfway down the road when he looked in his rearview mirror and he spotted the babysitter pulling into our driveway. And so my dad made a U-turn, he dropped the four of his kids off, and we would spend the night with a babysitter after all. Well, minutes later, my father's car was hit by a drunken driver. My father was killed instantly, and my mother was seriously injured, could not work for many, many months. Friends, that night changed my life, because my father didn't have insurance, and the man who hit him didn't have insurance. And so our family had to survive on government assistance and food stamps. I quickly learned what it was like to go to school with holes in my shoes and holes in my jeans, and that's long before it was cool to have holes in your jeans. You know what I'm talking about? And there were days that we had to go to school without a sack lunch in our hands. Those were difficult years, but we made it, largely because of people just like you, who would show up at our door week after week with bags of groceries. And as I look back now, I can tell you every can of soup, every box of cereal, it gave us hope that tomorrow could be better than today. But I'll never forget the night the police came to tell us that my father was dead and my mother was fighting for her life. Neighbors gathered in our front yard to hear the details. And one police officer stepped up to the porch and he addressed the crowd. He said, "Are there any family members or friends here tonight who are willing to take these 4 children home with them? If not, we'll take them downtown to the station where they'll spend the night. Are there any friends who will take them?" Just for a moment, no one responded. But then one young couple, Bill and Levada Davis, volunteered, and they invited us to live with them in their small trailer. For nearly a year, 10 of us lived in a single wide trailer. I'm convinced of this. My brothers and I, my sister, we didn't become angry, we didn't become bitter because of the kindness shown to us by the Davis family. They cared for us as if we were their own children, and time and again they would tell us, where you start in life doesn't have to dictate where you end. You see, without the Davis family, there would not be a Convoy of Hope today. But because of the investment they made in our lives, God was able to take my father's mangled automobile and transform it into a fleet of convoy trucks that are today crisscrossing this country, reaching millions each year. So this morning, I want to share with you very briefly 3 principles that Davis has taught us about loving your neighbor. The first is this. They taught us that sometimes loving your neighbor requires that we move beyond pity to action. Pity to action. They taught us that pity has no power. Pity will not feed a hungry child in Haiti. It will not give 4 frightened children a home. Pity has no power. No, sometimes compassion requires that we move beyond words and tears and we do something to offer tangible hope. Years ago, I had the privilege of meeting Mother Teresa in Calcutta, India. And in the course of that conversation, she said, "Young man, what are you doing to help the poor and the suffering?" And I was smart enough to realize it was probably not a good idea to lie to Mother Teresa, right? You know what I'm saying? Raise your hand if you know what I'm saying, right? You got it? And so I told her the truth, that I really wasn't doing much of anything. And to that she replied, "Everyone can do something." But right here in Indianapolis and in communities across the country, I've seen compassion in action. I've seen people do something. I've seen citizens make remarkable sacrifices to help their neighbor. I remember a community festival in the city of Detroit. It's much like the one that will come to Indianapolis next year. A large gathering, and that day thousands of guests came to receive a menu of free services. But as they came and they got in line, it began to rain. And the wind was biting cold. And we noticed that many of the guests were visibly shaking. They didn't have coats, they didn't have gloves. But without any prompting whatsoever, hundreds of volunteers began shedding their coats and draping them on the guests so that they could stay warm. I remember one man, he took off a leather jacket and he put it on a guest, an elderly man. I saw a teenager give away a down jacket so another kid could stay warm. It's a sight I will never forget. Friends, so much good can be accomplished through just a little kindness. At Convoy of Hope, we've seen it, how one bag of groceries, one coat, one blanket, one pair of shoes, one free dental screening can bring so much hope. Compassion in action can change a community and alter the course of a nation. A year of kindness can change everything. Secondly, the Davis has taught us that loving your neighbor requires that we cooperate around a common vision. With 10 of us living in a small trailer, I mean, I think you can understand, we had to learn to work together. We had to get along. There wasn't a bed for everyone, and so we had to take turns sleeping on the floor. There weren't enough table settings, and so we had to take turns eating our meals. We had to work together because, quite frankly, we had no other place to go. We had to make it work. And yet, living in such tight quarters, as you can imagine, there were times when conflicts would arise. But to the Davises' credit, they would not allow disagreements to lead to disunity. We were in this together, we had to make it work. Inside that trailer, we witnessed the power of cooperation. We're better together. But throughout history, friends, we have seen times right here in America when a crisis or the pursuit of a common vision has brought us together. Such was the case in 1863 when the American people set out to build the Intercontinental Railroad. I mean, some said this is an impossible vision, to lay railing across 3,500 miles, across rivers and canyons and mountain ranges. That's impossible. But thousands of laborers went to work from 63 different companies. And 6 years later, the final rail was laid. And as a result, the travel time from one coast to the other was reduced from 6 months to 6 days. One of the great accomplishments in American history, but it wouldn't have been accomplished without a spirit of cooperation and a common vision. And friends, even today, in the wake of natural disasters and crises, I've seen so many communities come together. Despite their different perspectives, their different political positions, their different religious beliefs, they decided, like a place like Joplin, Missouri, they decided that in order to rebuild their community, they needed to come together. Listen, America has a choice. Indianapolis, Indiana has a choice. We can allow ourselves to be enslaved by division, or we can focus on a common mission. We can set our eyes on the things that divide us, or we can embrace a vision that unites us. The Davis family taught us that a year of kindness and cooperation can change everything. Third, the Davises taught us that loving your neighbor and giving hope to people, it's not expensive. It's not. But neither is it free. It requires that you and I choose a life of generosity so that others can have a life of opportunity. You see, inviting 4 children into their home cost the Davises something. It cost them their privacy. It drained their personal savings account. But their investment in 4 children, their generosity, their sacrifice, gave 4 children a life of opportunity. Each year, thousands of volunteers work with Convoy of Hope in cities just like Indianapolis. They participate in our citywide festivals, and this is where government, businesses, civic organizations, churches all come together to provide free medical and dental care, free groceries, free shoes, free haircuts, job opportunities, and so much more. In fact, through a partnership with the National Breast Cancer Foundation, women can come to these festivals and receive free mammograms and free screenings. But these festivals somewhat resemble a huge carnival. It's so festive, it's so fun. Lots of balloons, lots of hot dogs, lots of games for kids. And it was several years ago that I was attending one of these festivals, and I decided that I was going to be a volunteer that day and work in the hot dog stand. And so I was working in the hot dog stand, just handing out free hot dogs for all the guests, and this one, probably a 10-year-old boy, 11-year-old boy, approached me. He was wearing a soiled t-shirt, a scrawny kid. And he approached me and he said, "Can I have a hot dog?" I said, "Sure. Do you want one with mustard, one with ketchup, one with mustard and ketchup, or do you want it plain?" He was a smart kid. He said, "Can I have one of each?" Right? That day I loaded that kid up with hot dogs. and with a huge smile on his face, he proceeded to stick one hot dog in each pocket. 4 hot dogs, costing less than $1, kept hope alive for one hungry boy. Giving hope to people is not expensive, but neither is it free. Friends, a year of kindness and generosity can change everything. I'll close with this. Abraham Lincoln did not always attend church on Sunday mornings because his mere presence created quite a disruption to the service. But he often attended the midweek service at New York Avenue Presbyterian Church. And he would sit in the pastor's study with the door cracked open so that he could listen to the message in relative seclusion and quiet. While returning from a midweek service, one of his aides asked Mr. Lincoln, "What did you think of tonight's sermon?" Lincoln replied, "It was well thought out, powerfully delivered, and very eloquent." The aide said, "So you thought it was a great sermon?" Lincoln replied, No, it failed. It failed because tonight the Reverend did not ask us to do something great." Friends, in 2015, let me encourage you to do something great, to make this a defining moment, to do something great for your community and your nation. Love your neighbor as yourself. God bless you.